Hello everyone, my name is Aubrey and today I'm going to be doing my October wrap-up. So October was actually a pretty good reading month for me. I have 6 books that I wanted to talk to you guys about and 2 books that I was reading / started in October but that I didn't finish. Lots of fun, spooky books, some thrillers. Yeah, I really enjoyed all the books that I read this month. It was a good reading month and let's just get right into it. I'm going to do this in the order that I read them because that just makes the most sense to me. First book that I read in October was My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. This was a lot of fun. It was so much fun. It's set in the 80s. It's about 2 best friends and one friend gets possessed by a demon and our main character, the other best friend, has to, save her. And this was really funny. It was very campy. I enjoy camp in my books. There were a couple of times when I, laughed out loud. I just thought it was really fun. I really enjoyed the friendship between the 2 girls. There's a friendship later on in the book between like a set of 4 girls all in high school. I thought that those relationships could have been fleshed out a little more, but as it was, I did really enjoy it. I think this would be perfect sort of beginner horror for anyone who is kind of a wimp when it comes to scary stuff. I know that I can definitely be a wimp sometimes. So yeah, I think this would be perfect for people who want to sort of dip their toes into the water and try the genre out. So yeah, there were 2 chapters at the end that I thought were a bit unnecessary. There's one chapter where we're sort of getting some closure with a certain character that I don't know, I just didn't think was necessarily necessary. And then the final chapter is kind of summing up the 2 girls' relationship through like the remainder of their life. And again, I just didn't think it was necessary. I thought that the book could have ended 2 chapters earlier and that, that kind of thing probably would have been better left up to the imagination, but it wasn't necessarily a deal breaker for me. It just felt a little weird and like tacked on there for some reason. I don't know if he just needed to like get his word count up or something, because this is a pretty short book. It's only like 320 pages or so. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I did like this. Would recommend, unless you just really can't handle any kind of horror at all, or if you're like particularly afraid of demons, for example, or like possessions or something like that, then maybe I wouldn't recommend it, but I think this is pretty tame compared to some of the other horror that I've read, so yeah. The next book that I read was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, and I think I'm probably like the last person on earth who hasn't read this book. This came out in like 2012, I think, and just completely exploded. It's got over 2 million reviews on Goodreads. Yeah, I remember everyone going crazy over this book, and I haven't picked it up until now. I didn't go into this book knowing anything, and honestly, I think that is probably the best approach to this. I liked just kind of letting the story unfold. I listened to the audiobook for this. My plan was to sort of go back and forth between the audiobook and the physical book, but I was enjoying the audiobook so much that I like didn't want to stop listening to it. I thought that the audiobook narrators, there's 2 of them because we're following 2 different characters, and I thought they did an amazing job. I was like hooked. I was so hooked. The weird thing about this book is that the big twist comes in the middle. So there's this big mystery at the beginning, and then the twist is revealed in the middle, and then we're dealing with kind of all of the aftermath of the twist for the second half of the book. And I've never read a thriller like that, so I thought that was kind of interesting that this book did that. And I kept expecting there to be like another twist at the very end, and there kind of is, but not really. So I don't know, I'm still not quite sure how I feel about the ending. I think some of it was a bit far-fetched, but I still just really enjoyed it. It's like, it was so dark and both of the characters were so unlikable, and it was just kind of, I don't know, like a fascinating read. I don't know how else to explain it, but yeah, highly recommend. if you haven't read it, and highly recommend the audiobook. I couldn't stop listening. I would just find, usually I listen to audiobooks while I'm doing stuff, so I'll do it while I'm doing dishes or like taking a walk outside or like folding laundry or something like that. And I was just trying to find excuses to keep reading, keep listening to the audiobook. And yeah, I thought it was great. The next book that I read was The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. I loved this book, which I feel like I always feel so weird when I start like gushing about horror, because it just feels like such a weird genre to like fall in love with. But I loved this book. I loved it. I didn't necessarily know anything about this going into it. I don't know if that's necessarily the best approach for this book because it deals with a very specific subject matter, which I'm about to talk about. So if you don't want to know anything about this book, I would just skip ahead a little bit, but I am about to talk about it. This is a zombie novel, which didn't know going into it, but you discover that pretty early on. This takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where there are these children who are zombies, but they behave and think like people. So they still have the hunger and animalistic instincts that the zombies do, but they also seemingly have, compassion, and they are clever and intelligent and all of that. So this is taking place kind of on an army base almost, and we are following 4 or 5 different characters, one of which is one of these little zombie girls, and they are running experiments on her and other children like her because they are trying to find a cure for the zombie parasite. And of course these children are incredibly dangerous, so there's all these precautions, keeping them in their cells and making sure that they don't get out and hurt anyone. And it was so good. It was very fast paced. It's just 400 pages, like 403, and I flew through it, couldn't put it down. And I thought that the ending was just so beautiful. For me, it was the perfect kind of bittersweet ending that I just love. And yeah, I thought all of the characters were really compelling. Melanie, who is our main character, was really likable and smart, and just like the journey that she goes through, discovering who she is, and all of that was just so well done. Yeah, I really, really loved this book. Highly recommend. The next book that I read was The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. I think this was my favorite book of the month. I adored this. I listened to this on audio. Neil Gaiman narrates it, and I just fell in love with it. This is about a little boy whose family is murdered by a man named Jack, and the baby gets away and he crawls up to a graveyard where the ghosts in the graveyard adopt him, and he is able to then do ghostly things as well, so he can fade and walk through solid walls and things like that. And so they name him Nobody, and he goes by Bod for short. And it's just about him and his life in the graveyard, and learning about his powers and learning about some of the other kind of unworldly things that live in the graveyard and beyond the graveyard. And I just loved it. This was a middle grade, and it was so whimsical and lovely and dark and just really great. It was just really great. I gave this 4.5 stars. Loved it. The next book that I read was Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I have a full review for this, and I will put a link for it in the description. I can't say that I enjoyed this because the things that happen in this are truly terrible and awful and sad and hard to read about. So yeah, this is kind of a difficult book for me to even talk about, because like I liked it, but I didn't also. So yeah, if you want more thoughts, again, I will link the review, but I would recommend this to Stephen King fans if you haven't read this, to horror fans if you can deal with very troubling subject matter. This book in particular felt very real. Like it felt very like happens in this, and I don't want to spoil it, but you know, the things that happen in this are real things. They're real things that people have to deal with. Not necessarily like the paranormal stuff that happens, but the stuff that happens before the paranormal stuff. Grief, death, all of that. These are things that everyone has to deal with, and it got dealt with in this book in a really disturbing way. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. And then the last book that I read was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Volume 1, High School is Hell. This is a reimagining of Buffy the Vampire Slayer in modern times. So she's got a cell phone. Willow is already out. Cordelia isn't like the cruel 90s mean girl stereotype. Like, it takes this setting and these characters that are very familiar, and then it just shakes everything up a little bit. So this was only volume 1. We didn't get that far in the story, but I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really fun. It was fun to kind of start over in a new way with Buffy, and it's been fun getting to see how things are different this time around. You know, there are new characters, new relationships. I just thought that it was so much fun. So I will be continuing with volume 2 and 3. Hopefully I will love them just as much. But yeah, I definitely would recommend for Buffy fans, and this might be a really fun jumping on point for people who aren't Buffy fans to kind of jump into, because like I said, they're just starting over. This is like an alternative timeline type thing where you don't necessarily need to know anything from the show or from any of the other graphic novels in the Buffyverse. Though I do think that you will probably get the most out of it if you are familiar with Buffy, but yeah, so I really enjoyed that. So then I have 2 books that I read a little bit of this month but didn't get very far in. The first one is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. This is the Barnes & Noble edition, and it's absolutely beautiful. I only got about 45 pages into this, so I was really not vibing with the writing style in this book, unfortunately. It's very info-dumpy, and it's very telly instead of showy. And I was just kind of struggling. I was also reading too many books at the same time, which happens to me when I get too excited, and then I start a whole bunch of books, and then I can't sort of balance all of my reading. So I think what I'm going to do for next month is I'm going to switch to the audiobook for this, and hopefully that will help some of the, I don't know, writing aspects that I'm not necessarily vibing with. But I do want to read this. I've heard such good things. I think that the representation in this is so important, and I definitely want to read it. So here's hoping that the audiobook is good for me. And then the other book that I read a little bit of but didn't finish is The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. I read The Final Empire last month? 2 months ago? Last month. I don't know. Time doesn't make sense to me anymore. But yeah, this was not necessarily a priority this month, so hence why I didn't get very far. I think I'm only 75 pages into it. So yeah, this is definitely a priority to finish by the end of the year, but I just, it just wasn't a priority for me this month. So, but already I can tell that the writing is better in this. So I am enjoying that. I had complained in my wrap up from September that I wasn't really vibing with Brandon Sanderson's writing style. Yeah, I am excited to finish this eventually and get on to the 3rd book in the trilogy. So that's it. That is my October reading wrap up. Thank you so much for watching. Please like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more from me. And I hope to see you next time. Bye.